Hello, Psych 101 students. Let's take a look at Learning Objective 6 from Module 3. How do adults develop? So we'll begin with early to middle adulthood. And as you can see, it says here, between the ages of 20 and 40, we actually experience a steady decline in muscle mass, bone density, eyesight, and hearing. Individuals, will start to notice that they can no longer drink as much alcohol, eat as much junk food, or get by on, as little sleep as they used to. So how can people respond to these natural kinds of changes that are taking place? Well, a healthy lifestyle, including good nutrition and exercise. During early adulthood, this can improve health throughout the rest of your life. Um, in one study participants who walked briskly 15 minutes per day or ran 5 to 10 minutes per day lived an average of 3 years longer than participants who did not exercise. So a little bit of exercise will gain you a few years in life, or it could at least. As we will look at how we transition to old age, and as it says here, by 2030, more than 1 in 5 Americans will be over the age of 65, and these older people will be ethnically diverse, well educated, and physically fit. Many people still live very productive lives into their 70s. They're showing a few examples in these pictures here. The Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor is in her late 60s. The actor Samuel L. Jackson is in his early 70s. And at the bottom, it's the Rolling Stones, now in their 70s, approaching their 80s, and they're still making music after 6 decades together. However, in general, the body and mind start deteriorating more rapidly at about age 50 or so. So we call it a senior moment when there's an inability to remember something that we knew a moment before. And this, becomes more common, obviously, as we get older. We may not notice cognitive decline until later adulthood, although it certainly does begin much earlier. Verbal and mathematical decline does not tend to happen until people are in their 60s and 70s. Healthy and mentally active people experience less decline. It's kind of a use it or lose it approach. It applies, you've heard that apply to physical bodies, but it's just as truly applied to the mind. Use it or lose it. So, you know, uh, if you keep healthy and mentally active, that's the key to living longer and fitter. Uh, older older adults take longer to learn new information, but once they learn it, they use that information just as efficiently. Um, the reaction times of older adults, or their mental processing, it slows down. But older people can still solve the same kind of mental problems that they used to. It just takes them longer, just like it takes them a little longer to drive and things like that. But it doesn't mean that they can't still do the same task that they used to. Older people tend to have difficulty with memory tasks that require juggling multiple pieces of information at the same time. This has to do with processing speed as well. Slowed mental processes are a result of your shrinking frontal lobes. And so it does slow down our processing speed as we get older. But once again, um, many people, at older ages, can still perform the same mental tasks that they used to. Decades of research show that when people challenge their brains by learning new tasks, such as working puzzles, reading, maintaining social activity, and maintaining physical exercise as well, at least 3 days per week, their risk of dementia declines significantly. So, what is dementia? Is it something we just get when we get old? Well, no. And then there are people that have thought that it is a natural course of aging, that that it will just strike people as due to their elder age, but this is not true at all. Let's take a look at dementia. Dementia is a severe impairment in intellectual capacity and personality, often due to damage to the brain. It is not a natural course of development. The majority of older people will not become demented. So we don't consider it a normal stage or state of aging. Dementia has many causes, including alcohol intake and HIV. But for older adults, the major cause is Alzheimer's disease. Approximately 5% of people will develop Alzheimer's disease before 70 to 75, and 6.5% will develop the disease after age 85. Even if you add those couple of figures up, it's like 5%, and then it's 6.5%. I mean, we're still, even though it's the most common cause of dementia, it's still, adding those two up, you get 11.5%, so just, a little bit over 10%. And so it's not, once again, the majority of people are not going to get dementia. The initial symptoms of Alzheimer's are typically minor memory impairments, but the disease eventually progresses to more serious difficulties, such as forgetting daily routines, and it may eventually reach a state where the person may not be able to remember their own spouse or even their own children. My mother went through Alzheimer's before she passed away, and for years at the end, she had no idea who I was or my siblings. It's pretty debilitating in the later stages. Okay, remember from the module on biological psychology, we learned that the hippocampus is a brain area that's used for forming new memories. Well, there was a study done here where the participants engaged in either vigorous aerobic exercise or gentle stretching activities, and then they did this for a year, and a year later, the results showed an increase in the size of both the left and right hippocampi, and improvements in memory, but only in the group who did the aerobic exercise. And you can see the results here. This is measuring the size of the hippocampi on either side. And you can see that in both cases, they got larger in the aerobic exercise group, while in the gentle stretching group, they were shrinking. And so one of the keys to actually, staying mentally fit is also to keep physically fit or keep physically active. We're going to return to Erikson. I talked about him in the adolescent section. And now we're going to move on to the adult stages. And there are 3 adult stages in Erikson's psychosocial theory. Intimacy versus isolation is stage number 6. It's the one that comes after identity versus role confusion in adolescence. And this is where young adults face the challenge of forming committed long-term friendships and romances. And you may say, well, can't you just do that anytime in life? Like, why is it at this stage as a crisis at this stage? And if you really think about it, I mean, if you were to wait till middle adulthood in your 40s or 50s before you ever tried to form an intimate relationship with somebody, you would probably be pretty awkward at it. For one thing, I mean, like the time has kind of passed where we are expected to have formed close connections with others, and I think it would be much harder later in life. So this is really the time where it doesn't mean you have to find a final partner or anything like that, but you need to experience it, and because this is kind of when the brain and also when society is kind of expecting it. If you are like that was a movie, the 40-year-old virgin or whatever. I mean, like, and if you watch a movie, I mean, he's it's a it's a comedy, and uh, and he's really awkward and everything, but that's probably somewhat close to the truth of what it would be like for somebody that hasn't had intimate relationships in at least by early adulthood. Okay, in the middle age stage, we have generativity versus stagnation. Um, Middle-aged adults face the challenge of leaving behind a positive legacy and caring for future generations. Um, and I'll tell you, I'm in this stage, and I see it all the time, and I feel it. Um, you really do start thinking differently. I wouldn't have thought of any of this stuff when I was younger in early adulthood, but it's you start looking at what does my contribution be, as what is it has been, what's going to carry on after I'm gone, and so you look to things like your for me, I look to my child, and who's a wonderful 17-year-old teenager now, and I'm very proud of her, and I know I've worked hard at being a good parent, and and I look to my teaching and things like that, and it is a time where you start considering what your legacy is, and that's what generativity refers to. Integrity versus despair is the final stage. Older adults face the challenge of feeling satisfied that they have lived a good life and developed wisdom. So consider what it's like to be facing the last years of your life, amid the disintegration of the body. Like you have failing senses, you may be dependent on others, or at least for some things, most older adults are, um, you know, and other issues and problems as well. But like, are you going to become bitter because of, oh, I can't, not seeing as well or hearing as well and not being able to move as well or do the things you used to do? Or are you going to hold it together and be satisfied with the life that you've lived? And this is what this stage really is about. You know, can you can you kind of encapsulate your life and feel like you've had a good run, and that and feel a sense of integrity and happiness, that not that you've done everything perfect, and you've certainly made a lot of mistakes, but you weigh everything, and if you feel like you've lived a good life, and and you participated in the generativity stage, and you left things behind, then it's kind of like you can relax. And this is what Erickson found in his research, that older adults, the ones that had a sense of integrity and were satisfied with their life, they weren't afraid of death. But the ones that did not feel like they made contributions, or did not, or felt like they still had things to finish, they were the ones that feared death and felt a sense of despair because the time was running short. Okay, a few more things about adulthood. Marriage. Around the world, the vast majority of people marry at some point in their lives or form some type of permanent bond with a relationship partner. The benefits of marriage are more significant for men than for women. Um, why is that? Well, women in general are better caretakers than men are. So men benefit from being taken care of more than women do, because wives help their husbands to eat right, to exercise, to remind them to go to the doctor, to smoke less, etc. Husbands tend to help their wives less in these regards because they're just not as, typically at least, they're not as qualified caretakers. And because women, the majority of women spend more time caretaking for children and infants, children, and adolescents. I mean, women are kind of the backbone of families and the backbone of taking care of others and in society. And because they do it, they get better at it than men do. And once again, there are certainly a lot of exceptions. Don't think I mean everyone, but and so when we get older, the men benefit because the women are kind of helping to look after them, but the men aren't as good at that. They may try, but they're not as good, and so the women aren't benefiting as much from the partnership in that way, at least. Okay. At any given time, the vast majority of married people report satisfaction with their marriages, and married people live longer, at least on average, than compared to non-married people. And once again, it's partially because of that looking after each other. And even though men aren't as good as at women, like I was saying, they still do contribute. It's better to have a partner, even if they're not great at being at caretaking, than compared to living alone and trying to do everything on your own. Okay. Having children, the birth of a first child is a profound event for most couples. In fact, it's considered the biggest transition that adults can undergo. And I would agree with that. When you form a partnership with somebody, I mean, such as a marriage or another type of long-term relationship, and especially the first time you do it, like it feels like the biggest event. It's a huge transition. All of a sudden, the first time you're living with somebody, the first time you're married, like it's huge. But compared to having the birth of your first child, I mean, like it kind of pales. I mean, you made that child, and you're responsible for that child. The marriage can break up, and you both survive, and but you can't. You don't break up. You can't break up with your child, and you never would want to, hopefully. And so it is a stronger transition. It does change your life more than any. So I completely agree that it changes your life more than anything. Um, okay. Children can strain a marriage by putting demands on time and money. So in longitudinal studies, they've revealed that couples' marital satisfaction typically drops for several years following the birth of a child. So it does have that downside of straining a relationship. Couples with children, especially those with adolescent children, they report less marital satisfaction than those who are childless. Um, okay, I okay, that's one. I do think it depends on age of children and whatnot. I mean, um, I'm not sure what ages that they looked at in the study, but I think you'll get different answers depending on whether you talk to older adults or ones with younger children or ones with adolescents. I've got nothing to add here. Having children is both a joy and a strain on a couple's relationship. And I kind of made that point with in the last slide. And finally, I really have nothing to add here either. I'll just read through it quick. Finding meaning in later life, older adults may perceive their time to be limited, and so they adjust their priorities to emphasize emotionally meaningful events, experiences, and goals. And that may mean different things for different older adults. They may have different types of priorities. I mean, um, anyways, older adults generally want to savor their final years by putting their time and effort into meaningful and rewarding experiences, like reflecting on their lives and sharing memories, and often connecting to the people that mean the most to them. And what you find is that in older adulthood, your social circle tends to get smaller. I mean, sometimes you can't help it because people, sometimes people may be dying off that were in your social circle, but also you're not you're not as willing to spend time with people you just kind of like, or that are more like acquaintances compared to younger ages in life, because your time's limited. You want to make every minute count. So you might put off people that you used to go out with, if they're not the ones that are closest to you. So you do see the shrinking of your social network later in life. And that will conclude learning objective 6 from module 3. And that will also conclude chapter 4. We will move on to chapter 9 and the last 4 learning objectives in the remaining recordings.